In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Sharon Eubank has been on the ground in 191 countries, from bustling cities to remote villages, leading humanitarian efforts that have changed millions of lives. But her newest book reminds us you don't need a passport or a billion-dollar budget to make a difference. Doing Small Things with Great Love, How Everyday Humanitarians Are Changing the World, distills her decades of global service into 12 practical, powerful principles anyone can put into action.
I was sent in 2005, right after the big tsunami happened in Indonesia, 2004, one of the deadliest natural disasters in our lifetimes. I think 300,000 people died. But as part of that, I was on the island of Sri Lanka where the wave had come in. It came in 2 miles, 30 feet high, and it just destroyed so much in that little island country. And my job there was to help businesses get back up and going. So fishermen get their boats and seamstresses get their machines that were ruined by the seawater. But as I was driving with a local person who was in the car with me being a translator, we came across a place where the train, the daily train that sat up high on the tracks had stopped. And as the people heard the tsunami warning in 2004, they took their little children and they put them up on the train because they thought the track would be high and it would be the safest place. The train was made out of heavy iron and that would be a good, safe place for them. So all the people were in the train and they accepted these little children up into there. And when the wave hit, and it hit so much harder and faster than anybody anticipated, it just tumbled the train. And 1,500 people in the train lost their lives, including all those little children. And so we stopped there. This is 5 months after it. And all these families have camped around the train because it was the last time they were all together as a family. And they're still in trauma. You can still tell that their faces are just a misery and they're still shut down. And they're saying to me the only English words they know, I lost my baby. I lost my husband. Can you help me? And I didn't have anything. I didn't have any food to share. I didn't have any little thing in my pockets for the kids. And I just felt so powerless. I couldn't explain to them that we're building houses just a couple miles away, to help, people again. But Shanta, who was the man who was with me, he got into the van and he pulled out a soccer ball and he starts kicking around, the dirt with the kids. And while he's doing that, he's asking people, he said, how's your bread making working out? And she said, I tried that new yeast that you brought me and that's working out. And another woman tells him, hey, we don't have washing powder. Can you help us? And he said, I'll look for some when I go. And he's doing this whole thing. And I realize, and this was pivotal in my whole career, Shanta, without any money, without a lot of training, Shanta is more powerful in this situation than I am because he's from this place. And it created that reality for me of, you are most powerful where you live. You are there all the time. You understand the culture completely. You speak the language, and you're not going to leave in 2 weeks. And that was a pivotal change for me because so much humanitarian work is organized around coming in, coming out, projects that begin and end, without ever taking into account the idea that grassroots people are the most powerful agents for change right where they live.
How can we as individuals find that power within ourselves?
We were talking, before we began the program about things we're passionate about. I think passions are a gift for people. I think it's a divine gift that you care a lot about something. And when you do, then you bring energy to it. And almost everything good starts with somebody who has some passion around something and they're kind of relentless. And I think we can follow those kinds of things as long as we make sure that they're not self-serving, self-directing, and we can direct our passions outward to people. And I don't mean to put you on the spot on your own show, but you wanted to learn about writing because you care so much about it. And you did that by highlighting other people and the work that they're doing. Anything like that, I think, is a way to start.
How do you distill the definition of purpose?
That's a very good question. In a lot of ways, we make our own purpose by the gifts that we feel and then the response that we get when we're doing that. Because when you get a favorable response, we do things. I mean, we sometimes do things out of duty, but most of the time we do things because the reaction that we get back is what we wanted. We see progress. We see people that are built up. We increase our network. I often refer to the fact that the world has spent $2 trillion in Africa, and the problems aren't any different. In 50, 60 years, we're still grappling with those same problems. It's because money isn't the deciding factor. The deciding factor is purpose. It's what you've talked about. And so we have to marry that resource. Of course, you need the resource, but we have to marry it with people that care about their local communities and won't go forward in corruption. And the ability to find people who are not corrupt and care about their communities and then support them in their work, I think that's where purpose-driven work comes forward.
There is a quote often attributed to Mother Teresa that we are all put on this earth to alleviate suffering.
I'm glad you brought up Mother Teresa, because when you talk about humanitarian service, she's always going to come up. She's such an iconic person. And the title of the book actually came from another quote of hers, that we can't all do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And I think about her. She could not change the fact that people were dying of leprosy, or, the people who came to her in her clinic in India. But she could be with them. She could hold their hands. She could clean their feet. She could tend to them and talk to them while they were dying. And when we say, well, that's just such a little thing, it actually turns out to be a very momentous thing to be with somebody as they pass away and die. And I think she had a great ability to communicate in these bite-sized little pieces that we all remember. You have a quote, I have a quote, we all have things like that.
Sharon Eubank's book is Doing Small Things with Great Love: How Everyday Humanitarians Are Changing the World. How did you distill such a vast landscape into just 12 principles?
They may not be the exact 12 principles, but they're the ones that are meaningful to me. And so I tried to go through my 28 years of experience and say, what is it that really makes a difference? My hope is that other people will say, hey, I think there's a 13th principle that you should add. I would love to have the community engage in that. Tell me what you've learned from your experience. I would love for this to be a discussion, not just these are the definitive 12 principles.
You've talked about the principle that we are most powerful where we live. What are some of the other principles that particularly resonate with you?
But another one that is very meaningful in my life is this idea about trusted networks. Money is how we approach change. But if money doesn't filter through this protective barrier of trusted networks, people that are holding each other accountable, and all of them evolved in the local community and the issues that are there, and care about it themselves, they're doing it. And we all belong to trusted networks. I got to tell you, the most contentious organization that I've ever involved with is my HOA. I hope they're not listening to the program, but we belong to these groups, these extended families, our church group, the PTSA, and those are all trusted networks. That's how civil society solves problems at scale. And if they're contentious, the way they sometimes can be, we can't move forward. If they learn how to work together and modulate each other's differences and be able to respect the people who have a minority opinion, that's still okay, then the money that flows through that is just so effective and powerful. So that idea about trusted networks as the absolute necessary companion to the resource we bring to a problem is maybe not as well understood as other things.
How do we work with someone whose opinion is 180 degrees at variance from our own?
This is the golden question. I have a friend in the Middle East, and he said, you Americans, you use relationships to get your projects done. You tap the people and you're going to get your stuff done. He said, in the Middle East, our culture is different. He said, we use projects to build our relationships, to make the relationships stronger. And that was really important to me, because when you disagree with people, when you have diametrically opposed positions, and we live in a very polarized time right now where people feel differently, and there's almost a cancel culture of, you're not my political party, you're not my faith, I'm not even going to discuss anything with you, I'm not even going to be around you. That is very, very unhelpful. And I take as an example, she's a Episcopal deacon in my hometown, and she's British, and she is a homeless advocate, and she works with the local governor. But she says, as she tries to address people who have they don't have housing, She says, I can disagree with you 75% of the time, but we can still be friends. The way we disagree on issues doesn't affect our personal relationship because I respect you. I know you hold those opinions for a reason, and I may have different opinions that I hold for different reasons, but we can still respect each other enough to be friends. That idea is needed. We need that idea more and more. And of course, it sounds Pollyanna-ish of we should all just respect each other. When it gets in the heat of the moment, when the HOA is going to battle, but we've got to step back and just say the relationship is more important than the project that we're working on. Let's preserve the relationships and be a safe place to be able to talk about our differences, and then we can tackle the issue.
We're talking with Sharon Eubank about her new book, Doing Small Things with Great Love, How Everyday Humanitarians Are Changing the World. My two favorite questions are, where does it hurt and how can I help? Is that a meaningful parallel to your message?
It is, and I would take it even a couple steps further, because where does it hurt? You have to ask the patient, the person. You can't assume the answer. You always make a mistake when you assume. So you've got to ask them a bunch of follow-up questions to figure out what is the real issue and really listen. And then you can say, how can I help? But I think there's some follow-up questions. How can I help you in the way you want to be helped? How can I help you in a way that you can help yourself? And what can I do when there's nothing I can do to help? Those are the lower levels of that kind of a question that really get into the depths of why it's so hard sometimes to do good.
And how do you find answers to that last question? That seems like the toughest one.
I think we all start out at the beginning of the spectrum of I have things, I have knowledge, I have goods, and I'm going to help other people who don't have anything. And in the middle of that, you realize, oh, they have some things and I have some things. They're different things, and we're going to engage and we'll have an exchange. And I can't think, oh, they're just so poor and I'm so rich, because that's completely unhelpful. And they probably have different opinions about me. But as you go along that spectrum, you recognize there are things I can do. There are things that I can't fix, but I can soften, like Mother Teresa holding somebody's hand. They're still going to die, but she's going to be with them and make that the best experience possible. And there are things at the end of that spectrum that I can do nothing about. And I have to accept that. I have to accept that there are limits to what I can do and rely on God and faith and those higher powers that we all trust in to take up the slack when we cannot do things.
What made you the woman you are today?
When I first graduated from college, I took a job in Japan because I had studied English as a second language, and I was going to be an English professor. And I had a little class of 9-year-old girls, and they were just barely learning English. So there's 7 of these little Japanese girls, and we were learning colors. So I would ask them, what's your favorite color? And they would do this huddle, and they would start talking to each other. What is the group's favorite color? And I'm like, no, wait, stop. Sachiko, I want to know what your favorite color is, not the group's. And they just blinked at me in confusion of, what do you mean? It would be so rude in their culture for one person to advance their preference over the group. And I finally stopped pointing at them, and I realized they're teaching me a really good lesson here, that as a member of a group, I have a responsibility to maybe find some consensus in the group and be able to work as a unit, as a group. I learned a really valuable lesson from 9-year-olds in Japan. I was so grateful for that because it's informed my life all along. We can do certain things individually, but if you want to do something at scale, you have to find ways that the group can find consensus and then move forward. And I learned that from Sachiko.
So many people want to help, but don't know where to start. What's a good first step?
I think the easiest way to start is to go to the principal of the elementary school or the junior high and say, what's your pain? What is it that's facing you? I live in this community. I care about the kids that are here. What's going on? And ask a lot of questions. And then I would go down to the city hall and I would do the same thing with the city council or the mayor. What's going on? What do citizens need to know? What are the priorities that you're worried about? And then you can start mobilizing energy around something where you're very powerful because this is your home and you know all the players and you're there all the time and you speak the language.
One of my favorite moments from the Ted Lasso series is the dartboard scene where he talks about being judgmental versus being curious. How do we become curious.
The key is just in that Ted Lasso episode. He said, if you'd been curious enough to ask me some questions, play a lot of darts, Ted, and then he would say, I played darts with my father every single weekend. It's the key is in asking questions and then asking follow-up questions. You told me something. I'm not going to move on to the next thing. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question so that I understand what it was you really told me.
We're talking with Sharon Eubank about her book, Doing Small Things with Great Love, How Everyday Humanitarians Are Changing the World. Why is it that preserving dignity is so important in humanitarian work?
I think for us to understand the real work that we're doing, you must have a commitment that every person has dignity just by the fact that they're a human being. Not what they know, not where they live, not what they've done. They can't earn dignity. Dignity is inherent in every human being. There's a story in the book it's just in your neck of the woods in Boca Raton, Florida, but it's about a kid named Dennis Eastman who was an immigrant from Haiti, and he went to school, Boca Raton High, and he realized it's so hard to eat in the school lunchroom if you don't have any friends, and he had gone through that himself. And so he started a little thing called No One Dines Alone, just recognizing as I go through the hall, I've got 6 of my friends with me, and I'm going to make sure nobody is sitting by themselves in that cafeteria. So here are these kind of popular kids at that school, and they just sit down and they talk to people who are on the edges. Every day, it doesn't cost any money. It's 45 minutes at lunch, and it went viral. I mean, it's all over the country now in these different high schools. And I really love that idea because it recognizes in the stratified, hierarchy of high school, everybody has dignity. And I'm going to recognize your dignity, that you're worth talking to, that you're worth knowing, that I'm going to sit down and just get to know you a little bit at lunch.
What was your high school experience like?
I was a very shy person. So I was just, please don't talk to me. Please don't ask me anything. I was not one of those popular kids at school. And
was there a pivotal moment in your life that put a laser beam focus on humanitarian work?
When I came back from Japan, I worked in the United States Senate. I worked for some Western senators. It was the first time that I realized you don't go to Washington and just hold your ground. The whole system is built on compromise. You have to compromise. That's how the democratic process works. And it isn't selling out to compromise, but you have to know what's most important to you so that you can give a little on some things and hold fast on other things. That was a pivotal learning for me. Just real close to that time, the Yugoslavian war was going on as it broke up. And the news was just filled with these women who husbands had been taken away and they were on the road. Their houses had been burned and they were crossing a border into a different place. And they didn't have any household goods. They didn't have any children. They were just in shock and so sad. And I came home one night and my mom is knitting these bright red slippers. And I said, what are you going to do with those? And she said, there's a big transport going to Yugoslavia and I'm going to send these slippers. And I'm embarrassed, but I thought in my mind, oh, Mom, that's such a paltry little offering, little handmade slippers, for people. And I thought, is that the best we can do in this terrible situation? You have women that are just, making slippers. But several years after that, I read in the New York Times about a woman who was in that situation in Yugoslavia. And she talked about how they had felt so dehumanized and so much violence against them. And they were living in bombed out buildings. It was freezing cold. And somebody came and delivered some woolen socks, handmade socks that somebody had made. And she talked about how that restored her sense of herself, that she felt like she was worthwhile, that somebody made something that was for her. And she put those on. And I had to go back and apologize to my mother and just say, when you deliver the right thing at the right time, it's the exact right thing. That's never going to solve the war in Yugoslavia, my mother's slippers. But it was meaningful to that person that a woman far away made something for her at a time when she needed it. And those kinds of experiences changed my heart to be able to say, this is a kind of work that I want to engage in all my life, to find the right thing at the right time.
We are living today in a time of universal uncertainty and a lot of fear. How do you maintain hope and energy in the face of an ongoing crisis?
I had a boss when I was working in humanitarian. He was a type A personality. I mean, the guy couldn't go on vacation because he just couldn't stand sitting there by himself. His wife was like, relax, it's going to be fine. He was just so go, go, go. And he used to call me into his office every morning. We'd do this little debrief, and he'd go through, I want you to read these articles, and I want you to edit these projects. And he'd give me this list, and I'd walk out of there with my head just spinning. And, okay, great. But as Lloyd aged and he got pancreatic cancer, he asked me to come down to his house. He lived about an hour away from me. So I drove down there on a Sunday. And as I came in, his wife let me in, and he was at the very end of his life. And he was pretty thin, but he had a legal paper, and he had written some things down for me. And he says, Sharon, you have the same personality that I do. I don't want you to burn the candle at both ends. I want to tell you something that you don't know. And I've written it down for you. And he just said, you've got to multiply and you've got to replenish. And he said, this is a biblical thing, and everyone thinks it's about having children. And, he says, maybe it is. But he said, what I'm telling you is, for energy to be able to go out, it has to come back in. I didn't know that in my life. And so you've got to do a big work, and then you've got to step back and celebrate and think about what you did and help everybody feel good about that. And maybe think about what you learned and take a little bit of time for yourself to recover. And then you can multiply your energy again. And then he tells me as I'm walking out the door, he said, Sharon, don't forget, it's a commandment. It's in the Bible. You've got to multiply and you've got to replenish, because he knows that I feel guilty. I don't know why, but we all do. We feel guilty taking care of ourselves and resting and celebrating some of the things that we did. And yet it's exactly the other side of the multiplying. And we have to do both. And for me, that is the key on being able to keep going, to be able to do things that are very emotionally hard and very taxing. We have to respect that and take care of ourselves, or it gets underneath our skin like shrapnel and it just explodes later on. And we can't afford to do that.
What do you do to refresh in high-pressure situations?
I mean, I do this. They're boring things. I'm a person of faith, so my faith is a real consolation for me. I just spent 2 weeks in Finland, which is special in my family, and no Wi-Fi, out on the islands riding a bike. That was a beautiful time for me. And I took 2 weeks away from my work, and it's very busy work, but I have other people that I can trust, and it was good for everybody. So those kinds of things.
How did visiting 191 countries impact your worldview?
We live like kings in the 21st century. Even the poorest people, we live like kings, and we don't recognize that. And then, of course, when we live in the United States, we have so many things that we take for granted, and then we just crab about because this tiny little thing isn't right for me, without recognizing that so many people don't have those kinds of things. And so it's brought a real balance to my life. And yet it's also taught me that everybody is rich in some things, and that we think we're so rich in the United States, and yet we're poor sometimes in relationships. We're on our phones all the time. We never look in people's eyes. We don't share a joke. We're not funny. And those are riches that we are sometimes lacking, that other cultures have, that we could learn from them.
What do you hope people will take away from their encounter with doing small things with great love?
I hope that people won't think that they're too small or too insignificant, or they don't have enough money to do anything. I've tried to tell a lot of stories of people who, there's a woman in my neighborhood, she's newly married, she has a little baby, and she has this dream of starting a scholarship fund. And she said she got enough money, she could only do one scholarship. But I thought, how terrific that is. You funded one single woman who went to college because of you. And people say, well, it's not enough. It's enough. Anything that you try is enough. I hope people don't get discouraged about that. And then at the end of the book, there's 50 prompts, because sometimes we think, I want to do this, but I don't know how to start. And there's just 50 prompts of things that you can do to help. Give a book to somebody, a book that you like, and tell them why you chose it for them, and see if you can't engage in something like that. Go visit your town council, help kids do homework. There's tons of things that we can do. And once you start, then the whole thing snowballs. You put your energy into it. It attracts other people. The trusted network starts, and off you go. You're powerful where you live.
The book is Doing Small Things with Great Love: How Everyday Humanitarians Are Changing the World, written by our guest, Sharon Eubank. Learn more about the book and about Sharon by visiting her publisher at shadowmountain.com.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.